All right. And then second note, I wanted to check if last week we had one point, which was AZIP 4, which had some discussion between a few people, which been a little long. So I think we agreed on a sidebar session. I just want to check if that happened.
Yes, it happened, although we didn't reach a conclusion. We are actually considering a completely different design at the moment.
Okay, awesome. I guess that's a good outcome. Amazing. I guess we'll move forward with AZIP 7 if Paolo's here, but I don't think he is. So then we can shuffle the order. Oh, great. Okay. Awesome. I think AZIP 7 was a little bit vague for me. That might just be a me issue for not documenting it properly, but I want to check which part of it we agreed to include and which part of it we agreed to not include, and if we need to make sure that it's updated in this AZIP.
Yeah. Last ACD, we agreed to not include the /ingle for a proposal that doesn't make it to L1. I've already removed it from the AZIP text. This morning, we actually noticed that one of the another slashing condition that we had included cannot actually be implemented, which is slashing a proposer who sends a proposal to a network that contains invalid transactions. Without going into technical details, it's just not feasible to slash for that. So we're dropping that condition. And if that happens, what the network will see is a proposal that just cannot be verified. And ultimately, the proposer will be considered inactive because that proposal will never make it, will never accumulate any reasonable attestations, will never make it on chain, will never make any progress in the network. So we have also updated the AZIP to remove that condition as well. I think that all the other conditions, all the other slashing conditions were not non-controversial. Would he suffer P2P scoring? No, not really, because the block proposal in itself, it's just a block proposal that contains a transaction hash that you cannot resolve to anything. Basically, the reason why we failed to implement this is that invalid proposals by design don't flow through the network. So what happens is you end up seeing invalid transactions. So and you end up seeing a block proposal that refers to a transaction that you cannot see and no one has, because the very, very few people who managed to get their hands on that transaction, they immediately dropped it because it was invalid. So we would never be able to get that transaction in the hands of enough people to vote to slash the offending proposer. So that slashing condition would never trigger, so no point in implementing, so dropped from the AZIP.
Awesome. I'm going to do a quick sense check on whether or not people want to go over this AZIP ahead of agreeing on it, or if maybe people have already checked it out since last time. Don't know how long ago the changes were made. I did see they were made though. Does anyone want to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on happy to move forward?
Sorry, Kira, I didn't get that question. Would they be affected to being inactive? What do you mean?
Well, not slashed, but effectively penalized.
Yeah. Basically, when that epoch finishes and we make the tally of whether a given validator was active or not in the epoch, for that slot, the proposer will be considered inactive. Yeah.
Cool. Looks like people all agree, so I think we already kind of marked this one for inclusion on AZIP 2, so we'll just go ahead and mark it accepted as well, so we can move forward.
Cool.
Great. Cool. Next up, we have too many tabs. David with a suggestion on reducing protocol contracts.
Yeah, so this is just, it's kind of tech debt, but it's not trivial. And essentially, we need to, we have a few protocol contracts, specifically the auth registry, public checks, and multi-call that were essentially made protocol contracts purely for convenience. during kind of early stages of development, and they have remained protocol contracts because there's just friction to removing them. So this is essentially a proposal to remove those as protocol contracts. They will just basically be user space contracts, and to shift down the remaining protocol contract addresses to be 1, 2, and 3 after that. Yeah, that's mainly it. There's one bit that's the sticking point, which is the auth registry needs to remain in the allow list. So it's in the public setup allow list right now. So it's kind of like, there's an argument that it's still kind of a part of the protocol because we don't have the ability to have divergent mempools. So yeah, the auth registry, its address will still need to be agreed upon if people want to use that in public setup. That's all something discussed in the AZIP itself. But yeah, I don't know exactly the extent at which people normally discuss AZIPs in the call, but I thought I'd just give a brief overview.
There's a couple of questions from Kira in the chat.
So as part of, I guess, the V5 upgrade proposal, I think we would need to include addresses of at least the auth registry, which is the one that is arguably still tied to the protocol because it's used today in the allow list. So as we get closer, I guess, to the actual upgrade, and we tie a Noir compiler version and an Aztec Noir version down, and we have kind of an address that we can actually stick to for the auth registry, we will need to include that in the upgrade proposal, I believe. We could probably tie it, we could probably tie it to an address sooner and just kind of put that in the actual AZIP, but my suggestion is to just include it in the upgrade proposal. So the question of who will deploy them is I think still somewhat unanswered. So the multi-call contract does not need to be deployed. It's a private only. But the auth registry and public checks have public functions, so they do actually require deployment. So basically, I don't want to speak for Aztec Labs, but either Aztec Labs would have to deploy them, or some we'd have to kind of treat it like the alpha payload and kind of make it publicly available and ask somebody to deploy it, right? So I don't think we've answered that question yet, even though that's the same question we were trying to answer back in February, the first time this was discussed.
I suppose it's interesting because if somebody has a need for these contracts, then they'll have to deploy them. And if nobody has a need for the contracts, then that's a good sign that maybe they're not useful contracts. Although I think the auth registry is a pretty important one. But it could be something that could work itself out. And thankfully, it's probably not the protocol's concern who deploys them.
I'm in.
This is probably a basic question, but these are L2 contracts, right? And so they can't be deployed until the network is live and the sequencers. And so at the time of the proposal, we would not have those contracts, is my understanding. And so they would need to be communicated after the upgrade is live and once someone has deployed them.
That's all true, except for the fact that we can deploy them to a deterministic address. So we can know the address if we know the Noir compiler version, Aztec Noir version, etc.
I guess maybe this is more of a wider question to people. How do we feel about this being in or out of scope for AZIPs and kind of in turn for the protocol? Are these contracts separate products or separate things that are not necessarily required for for the protocol, but just separate kind of standards that someone can take and deploy, versus it being something that has to go through kind of a core AZIP. It sounds like more of a standard to me, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so I think what Arno said is exactly right, which is that the removal is what the AZIP is about. So basically deleting these from the protocol, reducing the surface of what we define as the protocol, I think is an AZIP. Defining what these standards are, so the auth registry, multicol, those things could kind of be, just standards that we try to have, gain adoption of in the ecosystem, rather than like an actual improvement to the protocol.
Yeah, there's you can make an AZIP for a standard, right? So it's kind of like the similar to how the only Ethereum works. Mitch, did you want to weigh in? It was already said.
No, I was just gonna agree with what now Arno and David said.
Okay, cool. I didn't realize these were part of the spec in the first place. But yeah. Anyone else that wants to weigh in on whether or not? I think this is very uncontentious because it's just removing something from the spec. It's not something that's just, as far as I know, it's not necessarily something that's like has to be added to an AZIP, right? Like an actual on-chain thing. Or no?
Yeah, just just answered. I'd be I think interested in there being some kind of plan to deploy any that where it's kind of like useful for the network if there's just one version that everyone uses and they don't have to think about who deployed it and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, I think Mike's point stands that the market will decide.
Yeah, the nice thing, I suppose, is the address itself can be determined in advance as part of the AZIP. So we can have within the AZIP, once the code has been cemented, we can have universal agreement on what the contract address is, and then whoever wants to deploy it at some point in the future can deploy it for the whole ecosystem to benefit from that predetermined contract address.
Paula?
Yeah, sorry, something I'm not sure, maybe I missed. One benefit of having all these protocols flagged as protocol contracts and having a magical address is that if we find a bug in any of them later, they can be upgraded via a protocol upgrade. That is worthless today because we're not carrying state from one rollup to the other. But when we start doing it, if we start doing it, it means that we can actually patch things, and contracts previously written against any of the buggy versions will automatically keep working and tagging and hitting the fixed versions. That was one of the ideas of keeping all of these contracts as protocol. I agree that it doesn't make any sense to keep them as protocol because there's no point upgrading today, like when we don't carry state. But when that changes, we may want to revisit this and include them back into the protocol contract set. Like this is the same logic as bundling more logic into, let's say, kernels as opposed to application contracts. It means that from one rollup version, from one version of the circuits to the next, we can include changes, and any contracts already deployed automatically benefit from those changes without having to redeploy at all.
Can you say more like what scenario that would become relevant? My understanding is if they're just deployed as contracts, implementations can be upgraded, right? With the address not changing. Is that not right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like if any of these contracts are protocol contracts and have a magic address that refers to them, it means that you can have a contract that is hitting this particular, let's say, the multi-call. Mm-hmm. And that multi-call could change from one version of the protocol to the next, while your contract doesn't need to change. It's exactly the same contract and doesn't need to start pointing to a new address if you deploy a new version of multi-call with a fix. Basically, what we get by this is like an indirection level. Like we can swap from the multi-call, for instance, from one version to another without requiring more clients to change as well.
So it's between rollup upgrades. Like if there's state carrying rollup upgrades, is that the scenario that you're thinking about? Because you can upgrade contracts on the same rollup, right? With keeping the same address.
Yeah, if your contract is upgradable, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but you have to opt in as a developer.
Yeah.
So I think you make a good point, Paula. Probably deserves some further discussion about kind of after demotion of these contracts, if there's a bug in one of them, what does it look like? And maybe there's also a discussion to be had about like how we recommend people use these contracts, because if they're a constant in your bytecode, then if the address of the auth registry is a constant in your bytecode, then if there's a bug in it, then you're screwed. But if it's not, then that's different, right? And then you could kind of, as an app developer, opt to point to a new one after an upgrade. But that comes with its own security concerns, right? One note I wanted to make is that I think in theory you're right. Like it's nice that you have this address, this 1, 2, 3, 4 address that you can point to, so that the protocol can change and you have an upgrade. I think that in practice, I don't think that's not actually how it works today. So you can't actually upgrade a protocol contract without like changing the protocol circuits. Like I think that we have all of this logic in the protocol about like the derived addresses of the protocol contracts that I think requires more. I think there would be required more plumbing in terms of like the L1 contracts to actually be able to upgrade protocol contracts.
Okay. Yeah, in my mind, this always required the full new rollup deployment. The question was whether already deployed contracts in the network could automatically benefit from any changes in implementation, because they keep pointing at the same address. But again, I don't think it's an issue today. So personally, I'm happy to move ahead with this AZIP. I would just add a note to consider when we have like state migrations from one version to another. This is something we may want to consider. Yeah, I think you could, minimum. Yeah, it's a good point. But I don't think we want to open that kind of worms now.
Yeah, but it's a good point in the sense that if we do get to the point where we want to open this can of worms, that is a route we could consider, rather than making auth registry a part of the protocol when no part of the protocol actually refers to it. Nothing else on my end on this.
Do we feel happy to move forward with this? Or people want a little bit more time to think it through, look at alternatives potentially? Any other people that agree? Mitch is 4, it seems. I think I'll seem 4. Just get a general sense. Emojis seem to work well. Cool. I think a lot of people who have general agreements. Great. All right, we'll move it. We'll move it to accepted, and happy to move forward. There's one kind of last minute addition to the agenda, which is Luke, that will talk about Brandenburg v5. Not sure if Luke is here. Otherwise, Mike.
Yeah, I can take this. So I was just giving credit to Luke for having drafted it and overseen the changes. So there's a branch pending with lots of client-side proving optimizations, and they've been bundled into the draft AZIP 13. So they involve a lot of low-level cryptography optimizations, and there's one more accessible optimization, which is to the kernel circuits. They've introduced the notion of, at the moment, a kernel circuit can only process one app function at a time. So if you want to execute 3 functions, you have to execute 3 separate kernel circuits, and you pay a lot of overhead for that. So Luke's team are proposing the idea of, and they've got this already implemented in a branch, the idea of a kernel circuit which executes 3 function calls at once, and therefore you reduce some of that the overhead in constraints. I don't think we can go further than 3. Going to 4 or 5 results in too much memory or a degradation in performance, and so it's fixed at 3 at the moment. So for some applications and for some transactions, hopefully that leads to a nice speed up. Yeah, for the other proving system optimizations, happy to chat about them on the repo. I'm sure Luke will be able to offer more information than I can offer on this call. They've sought to, where they've been doing optimizations, they've sought to keep it very light touch and not make too significant changes to the cryptography. But we figured if we're going to make changes to the cryptography, we ought to do it as soon as possible, especially during this alpha phase, rather than wait so that we can audit for a long time. So yeah, that's AZIP 13, a big batch of making proving go faster. Oh, and also it's making proving go faster. Some of the optimizations also have the side effect of making proofs smaller, which should improve throughput because there's fewer bytes being gossiped around the network. And also some have the side effect of making native verification of proofs faster, which also helps with throughput.
I think we all like fast proofs. I think the more time we can give the team to audit these, the better. Is there general agreement on moving forward with this one too? Cool. All right. We'll move forward with it. Love to see the security audits happen. Lots of comments as well. Is there anything else that we want to discuss beyond these 3 AZIPs? I think there's a few discussions here in the chat. We can just take those in into the call here. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else to discuss? I think to wrap up, I'd like to quickly go over the 3 that we have approved and see whether or not these need to be included. I think they were all kind of slated for inclusion on AZIP 2. Just want to get a general sense of that. If so, I'll add them to the tentative list. I think 7 was already on there. So if we're in agreement to add 11 and 12 and 13, we'll get those done as well. There were a few comments on kind of the editing from Josh on those AZIPs, so those will have to be addressed first before approval, but look minor to me. Cool. I guess I'll take the silence as we'll include them. I think it was kind of already discussed. I think, yeah, maybe one final check is how are we feeling about the timelines for the early June cutoff? I know there's a few things that people still wanted to suggest. I think there was a bigger AZIP coming in from Amin about like a bunch of changes into the parameters that he wanted to do. Just want to check on status for that, just so that we have enough time to do 1 or 2 iterations on those.
That should be ready by next week.
Cool. Amazing. Okay. I think the cutoff for AZIPs for V5 will be roughly in 2 weeks, to give people enough time to implement things, right? So yeah, please make sure that if you do want something included, that it's being discussed in 2 weeks time from now. So we have two more calls to try to move things through. Awesome. Any other? Yeah, go for it, Mitch.
That's cutting it pretty close, huh? if we're cutting the branch on June 1st, if we're still talking about things on May 28th, it's a little dicey.
I think parameters we can agree on, but
well, parameters might be. But
bigger things will
There's,
right.
I mean, I'll just say this. There's nothing preventing us from having these all core dev calls on a quicker cadence than even weekly, right?
Sure.
So let us not be process cucks.
Yeah. I just don't want people to be trying to slam things in that last week.
Yeah, and I know Mike has a backlog of stuff he wants to get in, so I don't know what that looks like. I hope you guys have talked about what it is.
Oh, I think much of that won't happen until V6, but it's exciting. There's changes in the pipeline.
All right, I think let's tackle V5 first, and then we'll go to V6. Maybe a task for next week is I'll ask him about an estimated date. All right. Yeah, July is good. All right, we'll work on that. If anyone has any good names for this upgrade, I think it'd be fun to keep this tradition of naming upgrades going. Yeah, feel free to post some suggestions in Signal or in a different chat. It'd be fun. I see Kira furiously typing. Well, the last one was kind of boring. It was the alpha. All right. Okay. So we'll work on a good name. We'll come up with one. Yeah. In the meantime, we'll cut a little short today. I guess that saves a little disk space on this recording. So thanks all for joining. I'm looking forward to the AZIPs next week.
Thank you, everybody.